Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1241. The Blood of Yellow Flames Happiness. Chuangshang Beidao already had no confidence against the 14th young master alone, not to mention that there was a proper 4th level Saint Monarch, Jun Moxie, present. Furthermore, there was an OG powerhouse below, Gu Han, watching them closely, preparing to provide assistance at any time. How could they fight like this? Seeing that the situation was not good, he decided to issue a challenge instead. Originally, he'd never held any expectations that this challenge would be successful. If the opponent wanted to fight, they would have no options but to escape desperately. But who would have thought that the other party would agree just like this? This was an unexpectedly huge profit. As for 14th young master and Jun Moxie, hadn't they also entertained the thought of getting rid of these 6 people here? But after thinking about it for a moment, they still threw that thought out. This place was simply too close to the main battlefield. If they started a large-scale battle here, it would implicate too many of their own people. Besides, there was an even greater expert behind these people. That was the real catch. If they could meet those experts head-on, it would still be better than being ambushed by them. And so, the two of them unanimously decided on the same plan. Catch the king and execute the general. As long as they lobbed off the head of the main expert behind the scenes, everything would directly become okay. Well, as for the leader of the outsiders, Chuangshang Beidao also had the same thoughts as them. Catch the king and execute the general. Both sides knew the importance of taking out the leader. Their strategies were completely the same, and even their actions were the same. Everybody was hatching the same scheme. However, the results were destined to leave some people joyous, and some people aghast. Chuangshang Beidao's face was filled with joy, secretly glad that he was bringing home the big fish to be cooked. Behind him, the 14th young master followed closely, his face calm and stern. Internally, he and young master Jun were also exceedingly happy. They'd joined hands to destroy the enemy's army just now, reaping great rewards. Furthermore, they'd managed to lure out the big fish from the enemy's side. No matter what, Chuangshang Beidao had never thought that he would actually successfully lure the strongest expert of the Xian continent to their own expert. But he would have thought even less that the person he needed to lure the most was actually this white-robed youngster beside him. Although he'd managed to lure one expert over, the other was a much more dangerous character. On the other hand, the 14th young master would also not have thought that the great expert that the other side was speaking about was not just one person. And so, he'd rushed over excitedly, not expecting it would be 3 people. Furthermore, all 3 were true experts. As for those 3 great experts, they also hadn't thought that while they were trying to lure the expert of the Xian continent over, they'd accidentally brought in a 9 Nether's great demon. All these unexpected things ultimately ended up with such a situation where everyone was confused. The importance of this battle and the significance it held would definitely be something extremely far-reaching. The moment Chuangshang Beidao turned around, the other 6 Saint Monarchs also retreated. They were no fools. With the boss gone, the battle situation would now be left to them. Even without considering anything else, that pretty-looking kid who looked completely harmless was a proper 4th level peak Saint Monarch. The moment that kid decided to take action, it wouldn't be anything difficult to take out 2 or 3 of them. Jun Moxie looked smilingly as the 6 of them backed off. Not only did he not stop them, he even had the mood to try to strike up a conversation with them. Everyone, It wasn't easy for us all to meet like this. Why don't we stay and have a chat? But it would have been better if he hadn't spoken. The moment he said those words, the six of them ran even faster. Stay and chat? What is there to chat about? What if one of us says something that you didn't like while chatting, and you decided to turn nasty? Our lives are not enough to hold a chat with you. We're not peak 4th level Saint Monarchs. Truthfully, young Master Jun also wanted to get rid of them and remove any future troubles. However, he simply did not have the means to do so right now, however much he wished it. Those two big moves he did just now had completely exhausted him. First, it was controlling the flame of primal chaos over a wide area. Then, he used the power of earth and controlled with the explosions of those 4,000 Saint Emperors. Although Jun Moxie's body hadn't been injured, and his spirit energy had been replenished, the exhaustion was still not something that could be overcome so simply. Young Master Jun was already considered to have calculated very well. He'd purposely pretended to be harmless, and even used some flowery words to try and keep these fellows here. As long as he could delay them for an hour and recover to half his peak condition, he would be able to unleash a killing spree. But unexpectedly, these fellows were actually not dumb at all. Their ability to scheme was not inferior as well. For the time being, the clash between the peak experts of both sides had come to an end. Below them, the forces from both sides had begun fighting once again. Under the lead of the 10,000-plus Saint Emperors, the Outsiders' army covered the distance of over 600 li swiftly. Several hundred li on the other end, the flag of the Outsiders could also be seen fluttering grandly. It was actually a two-pronged attack. On the Three Holy Lands side, the 7,000-plus experts under the lead of Mo Wudao and the other palace lords were also advancing spiritedly with the speed of lightning. These 7,000 experts could be said to be the final trump card and also the strongest fighting force of the Three Holy Lands. That direction was also where the main force of the Outsiders' army were. As for the Outsiders' army on the other side, they were handed to Tian Fa and the evil Monarch Manor to deal with. Another 100 zhang more. The two sides were going to truly clash. To these top-tier experts, this short distance was something that could be covered in the blink of an eye. At this distance, both sides could see the gleaming weapons in their opponents' hands. Everyone knew that those sharp weapons could be plunged into their bodies in the next moment, slicing across their necks. Similarly, they knew that the weapons in their own hands also had the power to reap away the lives of their enemies. This attack could be said to be the strongest attack of the Outsiders' army. It was also fated to be the most intense battle. Having lost the assistance of the 14th young master, Jun Moxie could not use the flame of primal chaos in a wide area of effect like before. Similarly, without the previous conditions, he could not create any of those large black holes anymore. Right now, there was only one method, which was to use the strength of the army to block this terrifying tide. All of a sudden, a sharp howl rang out in the air, and a white shadow flashed like a glaring rainbow. Like a comet, this white shadow plunged into the Outsiders' army. In the instant that it landed, about a dozen Saint Emperor-level experts were sent flying with blood soaking their bodies. The white shadow was like a fierce hurricane. Everywhere it passed, it broke through the Outsiders' army's ranks like a sword slicing through bamboo. Countless heads flew high in the air, their bodies thrown out like rag dolls. In almost an instant, the momentum of the Outsiders was forcefully scattered. Gu Han was finally taking action. The effect of this Saint Monarch making a move was exceedingly shocking. The formation of the Outsiders was broken apart. The timing of this attack was truly perfect. Gu Han was originally waiting for Chuangshan Beidao to appear. If he could drag this mortal enemy down with him, it would be the most ideal result. However, Gu Han also understood that the latter was now a peak 4th level Saint Monarch. With his own cultivation reclining, he was already not a match for him. Most importantly, because of the 9 Nether 14th Young Master, this battle was not going to happen anymore. As for the remaining peak level fighting force on the enemy's side, Jun Moxie and Mei Xueyan could definitely handle them. Thus, Gu Han no longer had any reservations as he tore through the enemy. Right now, his only mission was to kill or injure as many outsiders experts as possible. He would deal the greatest amount of damage to those 10,000 Saint Emperors. That was Gu Han's mission. His only mission. Even if that mission would cost him his life. Like a sharp spear, the 7,000 experts of the 3 Holy Lands stabbed deeply into the enemy's ranks the moment Gu Han broke their formation. The moment they dove in, a rain of blood fell from the sky. The power scale on the 2 sides were exceptionally unbalanced for this battle. The Holy Lands' side was at a complete disadvantage. Not only did they lose out in terms of numbers, of the 10,000 plus experts on the outsiders' side, there were at least 1 to 200 Saint Venerable level supremacy enduring heavens. As for the rest, they had all reached the Saint Emperor cultivation. The Holy Lands' side was not as strong. The majority of those 7,000 troops were still only at the Saint level. There were even some people with just the Venerable level cultivation. If not for about 40 Saint Venerable experts holding the force together and the suppression caused by Gu Han, the 2 sides would be completely mismatched. The outsiders' side did not have any expert who could stop Gu Han, allowing the latter to achieve such shocking results. In a short moment, the Holy Lands' side even managed to seize the advantage. But as time wore on, with the outsiders' numbers, and the formidableness of their foundations, they still managed to regain a completely suppressive advantage. For now, the Holy Lands' side could still forcefully stand their ground. But it would be a matter of time before they were defeated. Jun Moxie descended from the sky with a fearsome momentum, his skinny frame darting about the outsiders' forces like a ghost. Everywhere he went, a path would be cut open by him like a wheat field meeting a tractor. The speed, accuracy, and brutality at which Jun Moxie struck was completely unstoppable. The outsider experts on both sides of him were all killed with a blade slicing through their throats. The tyrannical spirit energy that flowed from him followed the open wound, instantly blowing up their dantian, completely sealing the fate of all the enemies he touched. Even the chance to form a spirit seed was snatched away, not allowing their spirits to escape. With a shrill sword cry, the blood of yellow flame burst through the air, entering the battlefield as well. Clang! The sound which the blood of yellow flame made was as if it was cackling madly with excitement. It was truly nearly mad with excitement, to the point where even its body was trembling. The order that Jun Moxie had given to it was, "Kill those 2-headed freaks. Kill as many as you want. Kill however you want, as long as it makes you happy." This order was like putting a buffet before the blood of yellow flame who had starved for days and days, and telling it to enjoy itself without care for etiquette. This time, it might really die of happiness. Keek keek. How joyous. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1242. Did not let down the people. There were over 10,000 super experts in front of it, and they were all the best food for it to feast on. If it could swallow all of them, who knew what kind of level it would rise to? The blood of yellow flame swung happily in the air like a drunkard. It was so excited that it didn't know who to start on first. It simply spun happily in the air, emitting bouts of excited sword cries as if it were in a dream. Jun Moxie was sweeping through the outsiders' army like a violent hurricane, reaping lives everywhere. When he saw the blood of yellow flame's actions, he couldn't help but feel somewhat confused. Why was this sword suddenly stopping today? Could it have discovered its compassion and no longer wanted to kill? Raising his head, he saw the blood of yellow flame dashing around the sky like a headless fly, buzzing crazily. He seemed to be able to hear the blood of yellow flame shrieking excitedly. Wahaha! I'm rich! I've really struck it rich this time. There's so much good stuff here. Wahaha! A row of black lines immediately appeared on Jun Moxie's forehead as he roared. What are you doing? Aren't you going to move? Feck! What are you so excited about? If you continue lingering, you won't get a piece of hot turd even if you're rushing to eat poop. Blood of yellow flame immediately cried out to the sky. Who dares to snatch my stuff? With a shrill whooshing sound, it morphed into a gigantic ray of light as it slashed downwards. On the intense battlefield, the sharp gleam of a sword suddenly flashed, cutting a strange arc across the sky and deeply penetrated through a supremacy-enduring heaven's expert. As it exited, the red glow around it became even more resplendent. Following that, the supremacy-enduring heaven's expert's body dried up and crumbled to the ground. In the end, even the shape of his bones was not left intact, directly disintegrating into dust. As for the happily humming sword, it swung forward on its way, without any cares in the world as it pierced through two more supremacy-enduring heavens. If it didn't need to stop to enjoy the fruits of its effort each time it killed someone, this extraordinary sword would have a much higher kill rate. But even so, as it continued its killing spree, the time between each time it stopped became shorter and shorter. With extreme speed, it flitted around the battlefield, suddenly appearing on the left, and suddenly on the right. Everywhere it went, a trail of dried bodies was left behind. The less unfortunate ones were still able to keep a full skeleton, while the others all turned into dust. The killing efficiency it showed became more and more shocking as time passed. Whenever the sword light flashed, several bodies would dry up and collapse. The blood of yellow flame sliced a path through the battlefield, turned around, and continued to kill. With such frightening momentum, who could stop it? It wasn't that no one had noticed the movements of this fiendish sword. Truthfully, many people had tried to stop it. However, their efforts were all in vain. The blood of yellow flame's strength was already above even young Master Jun's. In this kind of battlefield where its agility was the most useful, it was able to come and go as it pleased. Jun Moxie's methods were also exceedingly ruthless. Everywhere he went, people fell left and right as he hurried towards Guhan. Behind him, the violent sounds of explosions rang out continuously from the experts that had been forced to self-detonate by him. Unfortunately, such extreme measures were completely useless against young Master Jun, who was hiding in the void. No matter how violent the explosion was, could it shatter the void? As time passed, the situation on the battlefield became clearer. With the Holy Lands as 40-something Saint Venerable and above experts present, they were able to maintain some sort of balance. However, this balance was being reduced as time passed slowly, to a point of near collapse. The more time passed, the more unfavorable the battle situation was. Even with Guhan, Jun Moxie, and the blood of yellow flame dominating the enemy, the overall situation was still not something that could be overturned so easily. Leng Tong's cultivation was only at the saint level, and against so many powerful saint emperors and strong experts on the outsider's side, it was undoubtedly very disadvantageous for him. At this time, The three comrades around him had already exhausted all their strength long ago and self-detonated. To the people of the Holy Lands, they would prepare themselves to self-detonate as long as they met an opponent above Saint Venerable. Among the throngs of bloodthirsty soldiers, Leng Tong gradually fell into the same situation. The three comrades beside Leng Tong was the same, being at the saint level of cultivation. Their self-detonation had also only been able to injure their enemies, without affecting the battle results at all. Truthfully, it was already a pretty good result for a saint's self-detonation to hurt a saint emperor. However, such a result caused Leng Tong to feel exceedingly angry and aggrieved. Death was not scary at all. The scariest thing was dying a worthless death. Unable to calm his heart, he stumbled slightly and was hit by an enemy's palm. How could a palm from a saint emperor be light? Leng Tong felt a cold iron taste in his mouth, but before he had time to spit it out, he gritted his teeth and charged forward again, completely abandoning his defense. Grabbing tightly onto the saint emperor that had injured him. Disregarding the frenzied counterattack of the enemy, he sunk his teeth deeply into the enemy's throat. A loud crack rang out, and blood flew everywhere. The perfect row of white teeth actually managed to tear the Saint Emperor's throat into shreds. Such a result was completely unexpected. The Saint Emperor howled painfully as he looked at Leng Tong with disbelief. However, his body had already lost all its strength. The female body behind him let out a shrill scream and whipped around, fiercely slamming three palms onto Leng Tong's body. Violent cracking sounds rang out, and Leng Tong's 7 apertures burst with blood. However, he still remained smiling savagely as he held tightly onto the Saint Emperor's body like an octopus. With a final gasp of breath, his body began to swell. The male body of the Saint Emperor was already completely finished, and the battle strength dropped drastically in an instant. In a short moment, the female body was unable to get rid of Leng Tong. Knowing that the other party was about to initiate a final self-detonation attack, she screamed savagely and rained down her fists continuously against Leng Tong's body. Leng Tong cackled madly with laughter. "Are you scared now? You perverted freaks. Follow this daddy to the Yellow Springs." With a final gleam in his eyes, his body swelled to the extreme and blew apart. The violent explosion instantly blew the supremacy-enduring Heaven's expert's body into two, blasting it high into the air where it broke apart further. So. Several blood-drenched figures shot across the sky. These were the few Saint Venerables that had followed Xia Changtian before. Their faces were incredibly wretched, and their bodies were filled with wounds which bled freely, like fireflies dashing into the fire. They threw themselves into the densely packed group of outsiders experts. A short moment later, several terrifying booms rang out, instantly clearing a large area. Over 100 outsiders experts were buried together with them. The point of the explosion was not far from Jun Moxie, and the latter had practically witnessed everything with his eyes. In that moment, even young Master Jun could not help but feel somewhat moved. No matter whether their previous thoughts and actions were right or wrong, this explosion had resolved everything. Mo Wudao, who only had a venerable cultivation and was under the heavy protection of the Holy Lands' experts. Drenched in blood, he roared. "What kind of time is this now? You're still concerning yourselves with protecting me? Hurry up and go and kill the enemy. Don't care about me anymore. Quickly go up and kill the enemy." Seeing that those experts were still hesitating, unwilling to leave his side, Mo Wudao cursed and separated himself from them. With a resolute gleam in his eyes, he shot forward, yelling, "Our holy lands did not let down the people." His voice was tragic and savage, as though his throat was filled with blood. In the moment that he shouted those words, all the experts around him could clearly see 2 lines of tears flow down the sides of his face. However, those tears were instantly blown away by the intense winds. With a brilliant sword flash, Mo Wudao disappeared into the middle of the enemy ranks. Amidst the bloodthirsty howls, an explosion that sounded no different from the cacophony of explosions in the background rang out. With that explosion, the palace lord of the elusive world of immortals had already turned into a mist of blood. Logically, with Mo Wudao's strength as a venerable level expert, the impact he could bring to the battlefield was extremely minimal. Even with that self-detonation, not to mention killing any outsiders' experts, it would be unlikely for him to injure many enemies. However, the effect that this explosion brought about was exceedingly shocking. The several hundred people from the elusive world of immortals that saw this scene instantly howled aloud with grief and rage. Blood even flowed from the eyes of some people as they charged over madly. In that moment, everyone even felt their blood ignite to a terrifying extent. Apart from death and dying a flashy death in battle, they no longer had any other wants. Our holy lands did not let down the people. Hundreds of elusive world of immortals experts chorused at the same time as they cried tears of blood. Raising their heads to the sky, they roared. It was as though they were swearing or proving something. It was as if they were shouting their lungs out for the entire world to hear. Without further hesitation, they charged into the densest enemy ranks and together, a gigantic explosion blasted out, echoing the final voice of the elusive world of immortals in this world. The shockwave of blood and flesh instantly cleared out a large patch of land as countless brave souls rose up. Mo Wudao, elusive world of immortals. Ha ha ha. A tall figure stood up, his face filled with resolution. With a loud laugh, this tall figure roared. The elusive world of immortals declared that they did not let down the people. Then, what of my supreme golden city? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1243. No regrets for life. We also did not let anyone down. We did not let the world down. We did not let the common lives down. The 2,000 experts from the Supreme Golden City chanted, punching their fists in the air with such great strength. They roared with their soul. We did not let this continent down. We will prove that we did not let anyone down with our lives. Use our souls as offerings to the common lives of the world. Shiruachin whipped out his long sword as his beard swayed. And fight to the death. Fight to the death. With a thunderous roar, 2,000 experts went charging out. Every one of them was exhausted and covered in wounds from the numerous fights they had before. But they had fought with their strength, power, and courage earlier. But this time, they were fighting using the last bit of brilliance left in their lives. The continuous sounds of self-detonation rang out incessantly. Wearing a smile, countless experts transformed their bodies, and the Xian Qi they had painstakingly cultivated turned into one final boom. With no complaints, no regrets. Not a single one of them hesitated. The number of outsiders decreased drastically again. Huyan Aobua of the illusory blood sea let out a thunderous yell, 2 trials of blood leaking from his eyes. Mo Wudao. Shiruachin. You 2 old farts. Leaving just like this without saying bye? Of all things, you just had to die before me. Preposterous. How preposterous. Wait for this daddy to come and settle this score with the both of you when I get there. In the midst of his yelling, Huyan Aobua roared into the skies. How could we? the illusory blood sea be willing to be left behind? The three holy lands must exist together even if it's in the Yellow Springs. All his men perked up and yelled. Indeed. Lord is right. Even if it's in the Yellow Springs, it is still the inseparable three holy lands. Huyen Aobua cackled. Since we have decided to reunite in the Yellow Springs, then what are we waiting for? Brothers, follow me to chase after them. Ha ha ha, catch up with them. Reunite in the Yellow Springs. All the experts from the illusory blood sea hollered. One purple-robed man came darting out and yelled. Illusory blood sea, I'll open the path. With the flash of his purple robes, this Saint Emperor shot 30 zhang forward like a meteor, landing in the sea of outsiders first. In his maniacal laughter, a loud explosion rang out, blood and flesh flying everywhere. Huyen Aobua gave a sorrowful but proud smile. Good brother. Then, as he flashed his sword about, he bellowed. Then, what are we still waiting for? Countless of good brothers are waiting for us to join them in the Yellow Springs. And all the remaining men went charging towards the remaining outsiders in a frenzy. A cacophony of explosions shook the world. The brave soldiers of the three holy lands and used their courageous spirits to prove their existence. This bravery and courage had shook the heavens and earth and crippled the outsiders' forces. Gu Han was also charging berserkly in the enemy's formation. Endless cries rang out from the places he passed. And what was left was a sea of broken limbs and decapitated heads, fresh blood spurting into the air. Countless outsiders wanted to defeat him by self-detonating, but Gu Han went charging through it all, using his protective layer of Xian Qi, massacring and slaughtering without a single care. Honestly, Gu Han's action was extremely unwise. His Xian Qi cultivation was undoubtedly high. All these Saint Emperors and Saint Venerables couldn't deal much damage to him with their self-detonation. But even though it may not have significant damage, and he could ignore one or two, what if it was 10 people doing it at the same time? Or even more? Even the powerful Gu Han could not disregard such an aggressive attack. But right now, Gu Han had already completely disregarded all of these. There was nothing else on his mind. To kill. And only kill. Watching every single one of the Holy Lands' forces turn into legends and history, Gu Han's eyes were filled with tears. His vision was already blurry. He may have sounded all heroic and liberal when he was speaking with young Master Jun, Mei Xuan, and all the beast kings of Tian Fa previously, completely unconcerned about life and death. But in this instance, when the destruction of the Holy Lands turned into a reality, he ultimately couldn't remain as aloof. What hurts still hurt. What was painful remained painful. Gu Han's entire heart was broken. The only thing that remained unchanged was Gu Han's unstoppable, formidable, and rapid attacks. Jun Moxie cut his way through the sea of people, stepping on the mountains of corpses as he rushed over. The blood of yellow flame continued to dance in the air in a frenzied massacre, enjoying the sumptuous meal. This Saint Emperor army consisting of over 10,000 outsiders was only left with less than 2,000 now. In terms of manpower, it was a considerably glorious battle record for the three Holy Lands to achieve with their 7,000 men. Gu Han dealt another powerful palm, sending blood flying across the air. He roared hysterically. Jun Moxie. Go back there. There's no one there to hold the fort over there. Leave this side to me. Jun Moxie's eyes reddened as he replied calmly. Old Gu. All the heroes of three Holy Lands have already left. But you can't leave because of this. This battlefield, the continent, still needs you. Gu Han continued to rain attacks, slaying all the outsiders around him. He yelled, "Jun Moxie! Don't make me hate you at the last moment. Go! Leave this place. Go over there. Hurry up and go, ah!" From the other side, an earth-shaking battle cry rang out. The outsiders have clearly began launching their attacks. Get lost, ah! Get lost! Go over there. Hurry up and get over there. Gu Han yelled in a crazed manner. The Holy Lands are already gone. Do you really think I can continue living? What's the point in living anymore? Jun Moxie, don't make me regret. Don't make me look down on you. I'm part of the Holy Lands. This is a fact. A fact that will never change for eternity. Jun Moxie turned silent, only feeling a throbbing ache in his heart. Go. Go over there. Gu Han begged. Jun Moxie, I beg you, leave this place to me. Leave everything here to me. I beg you. He suddenly roared hysterically. I beg of you. Tears finally fell from Jun Moxie's eyes. I understand. I leave everything here to you. I'm going now. Take care. I hope we will meet again. Then his white figure flashed, and he vanished before Gu Han. Gu Han gave a satisfied smile. Jun Moxie. Many thanks. Don't ever forget to kill Zhang Kuang. This is what you promised the Holy Lands. And don't ever forget about what I entrusted you to do. Please. Jun Moxie's heart was filled with grief. He knew that Gu Han had already decided to throw his life here. The Holy Lands had fallen to ruins, and Gu Han no longer had any reason to continue living. At the same instant he left, Jun Moxie activated the power of Earth and all of the spiritual chi he had saved up earlier. Whoosh! Two giant mountains that were 100 zhang in height rose on either side of Gu Han, only leaving a passage that was about 10 zhang wide between them. If the outsiders wished to bypass this barricade, they'd have to go through Gu Han. Gu Han had already decided to battle to his death alone. Then, the only thing Jun Moxie could do for him was to help him create an environment where he became an uncrossable mountain. Gu Han had already decided to battle to his death, so Jun Moxie would help him create a legend. Holding back 10,000 outsiders, with the strength of one man alone. The moment both mountains were erected, Jun Moxie's vision faded black from practically exhausting all his spirit energy. An unprecedented sense of fatigue and exhaustion hit him, and he barely managed to keep himself from falling out of the sky. Erecting two giant mountains within such a short period of time. With Jun Moxie's current rate of recovery, he had already overexerted the power of Earth. Gu Han was astonished by this sudden change in environment, but he did not hesitate. In a flash, he took a few steps back and flipped over, landing firmly right in the mountain pass that was just created. He stood with his palms behind his back, oozing out a murderous aura from head to toe. His clothes drifted in the air as he stood alone, with an aloof look in his eyes. His stance and tremendous presence had terrified all the outsider experts in front of them. They all couldn't help but stop in their tracks. They could distinctly feel that this person in front of them was a tall mountain that they could not pass. If they wished to pass, the price to pay was their lives. Gu Han looked at them quietly and suddenly let out a deep breath. I am the only one left from the Holy Lands now. The legacy of 10,000 years has come to an end. The expedition today will turn us into legends. Gu Han's voice was unusually calm and aloof, but it echoed in the air for a long time. The noise from the battlefield couldn't drown out his voice. His voice might have seemed aimless, as if he didn't have a designated audience, But everyone from the Tian-Fa forces knew that Gu Han was speaking to them. Or it can be said that these were the final words Gu Han had to say while representing the three holy lands. Thus, everyone who did not partake in the battle listened silently with a solemn expression. A gust of wind blew past, seemingly carrying a hint of autumn with it. The elusive world of immortals has existed for 11,300 years and has disciples that have exceeded millions. Since its establishment, we had shocked the world. Then, the outsiders invaded, and in order to prevent them from entering the continent, we abandoned our original establishments and moved into the wilderness. It has been 8,633 years since then. Gu Han's beard and hair fluttered in the wind. The supreme golden city and illusory blood sea are the same. From past till now. Today, it will all turn into nothing. The efforts of 8,600 years will turn into smoke overnight. From ancient times till now, millions of brave souls have returned to the heavens for the continent. The only survivor from all the bloody battles is me. Gu Han laughed in a crazed manner. I, Gu Han, am part of the Holy Lands, in life or death. Slaying the outsiders, stopping their invasion, protecting the continent and the common lives. This is the duty of the Holy Lands. I will not forget it even if I die. I must not die in the hands of the outsiders, or I will be cursed in my death. The spirits of heaven and earth shall witness my vow. I make with no regrets for life. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1244. Deafening Sound. As Gu Han spoke, his beard and hair flared with every word he said. His aura surged, and he slowly brought his sword up before his chest. Then, he remained silent. The air was filled with his preparedness to sacrifice. From far away, Mei Xueyan had tears in her eyes, thousands of emotions coursing through her. Qiao Ying felt extremely shaken. Her tears had already blurred her vision. Her petite frame trembled and shivered, feeling as if something that was extremely important to her was gradually leaving her. A feeling of devastation and grief consumed her. Gu Han suddenly gave out a deafening cry that seemed to never cease. Before it ended, the sword in Gu Han's hand shook and let out a chilling cry. As the boundless sword light shot from it, Gu Han had already charged into the outsiders' army with his sword, striking first instead of waiting for the enemy to strike. A lifetime of 3,000 years, with a sword that led millions. Standing at the peak for centuries, cutting past and present with a single sword. The last glory of the Holy Lands, Gu Han. And only Gu Han. The sword light flashed about as blood spurted out like fountains. Heads rolled onto the ground and blood turned into rivers. As if it had been flowing until now since 8,633 years ago. At this moment, Gu Han's battle strength had incomprehensibly returned back to its peak form. He was so calm and cold to the point of ruthlessness. He berserkly slayed his way amidst the outsiders. All the crimson rain and devastating screams seemed to be playing the most solemn, stirring, and final dirge of the three holy lands. He only attacked, dropping all his defenses. Aside from Chuangshan Beidao, 3 of the other 6 Saint Monarchs had already rushed over, and began to launch a joint attack on Gu Han with the remaining forces. Gu Han was not afraid, nor worried. He who had returned back to his peak form moved with great ease amidst the joint attack of over 1,000 people, despite wielding only his sword. Countless of sharp swords went slicing across his body. Some of them were instantly shattered by his Xian Qi, along with their wielders. Some with higher cultivation and managed to keep a grip on their swords and managed to stab it into his flesh. But their swords were instantly broken by his dense and thick xian qi. Even the stronger experts who managed to deal deep cuts to his body with their weapons were instantly met with a vicious counterattack. Although he was gravely outnumbered, Gu Han remained unmoved about it. His eyes remained calm and incisive. After he charged and slayed the enemies for some time, he would turn back and guard that passageway, as if he had still managed to protect the 10,000 years of glory belonging to the Holy Lands. Then, he went charging forward again, raining massacre. Then back and out again. Back and forth, repeating ceaselessly. Right now, Gu Han was like a killing machine that did not know exhaustion. He could accurately unleash his strongest prowess at any moment, dealing the enemies the harshest attacks. In this hour, he had already repeated this over 20 times. Every single time, it was a sea of corpses and blood. Countless outsiders crumbled beneath Gu Han's feet. Gu Han laughed to his heart's content. In his entire life, 2 lifetimes, he had never behaved this willfully. At this final moment of his life, he had to strive his hardest to be willful just this once. His pupils were already dilated, reflecting the thrill from massacring. All those faraway memories, belonging to his previous life and current life, belonging to Wu Shan-yun and Gu Han. In this endless massacre, the world seemed to have lost all its color and sound. Only the flashbacks of Gu Han's 2 lifetimes stubbornly and silently replayed in his mind. Every single flashback was just that clear. Sweeping across the world in his previous life, joining the Holy Lands as a spirit Xian, the glory of resisting the outsiders for thousands of years in the elusive world of immortals. All the names of those seniors and glorious days, how proud I was back then. Proud, because I'm part of the Holy Lands. Who had ever disputed their achievements of 10,000 years? Is the honor and glory over? This sentence appeared in Gu Han's mind. He suddenly felt an excruciating pain in his heart. He couldn't help but holler loudly. Is the honor and glory over? Are they over? Are they all over already? Is it that the efforts and contributions in the past are dismissed the moment there's a mistake? Is it? Is it? Contributions cannot cover the mistakes, but mistakes can erase all the achievements. Is it? Is it? He roared angrily into the skies, as if he were questioning the heavens. The Holy Land is a humiliation. Is it? 10,000 years of effort and sacrifice. 10,000 years 10,000 years Gu Han howled, his beard and hair flying as his tears of blood flew in the air. Countless of dismembered outsiders' parts were sent flying away by him, but he still continued to yell crazily. Mistake. A mistake. Use all our lives to make up for it. Will that do? Will that do? He turned around abruptly with a whoosh. His violent chi shot across the surrounding, causing countless of outsiders to be sent flying in the air pathetically. Even if we were wrong, we did not let the common lives down. Gu Han howled. Even if we were wrong, we did not let this continent down. We did not let anyone down. No one. Not at all. The bitter battle went on for a long time, and the corpses of the outsiders had already formed a small mountain that was continuing to grow in size. Gu Han was drenched in blood, standing right at the top of this small mountain, stepping on this literal mountain of corpses and bones. He looked at the remaining 700 outsider experts ahead of them as if he were looking at corpses. He had already buried over 1,000 Saint Emperor experts from the outsiders with his hands. Although it was a brilliant achievement, Gu Han wasn't in an optimistic state. He wasn't completely out of gas, but he was approaching it. His left hand was already cut off, and a shiny sword protruded from his belly. That was the work of an outsider Saint Monarch. Naturally, Gu Han would not treat the Saint Monarch who had done this unfairly. At the moment he was struck, he used the sharpest attack to slay him, erasing him for eternity. The reinforcements from Tian Fa had already arrived in the area, so how could they bear to watch Gu Han fight on his own? They had wanted to lend support numerous times, but were stopped by Gu Han. If he allowed the Tian Fa warriors to join the battle, Gu Han would definitely be able to get out safely. It didn't matter how severe the injury is. As long as he lasted till the time frame limit of the effects of the heaven reversal pill was over, the most severe of injuries wouldn't matter. With Gu Han's capabilities, it wasn't impossible for him to attain even higher levels. Even if Tian Fa did not participate, with Gu Han's prowess, if he wished to leave, there would be no one present who could stop him. But all these were already not in Gu Han's considerations. This battle belongs to the Holy Lands. Before the last person from Holy Land dies, no one is allowed to interfere. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. The Holy Lands are not wiped out yet. The Holy Lands have yet to fall. We're still fighting. Gu Han wore a crazed expression. If anyone comes, I'll commit suicide. Gu Han was no longer fighting for himself, nor slaying the enemy. It was only for the honor and glory of the Holy Lands. He knew that if he fell, then the Holy Lands would really become a part of history and turn into a thing of the past. So Gu Han used all his might and wrung every single bit of energy in him to prolong the existence of the Holy Lands. Even if it was only for a single breath. It's still Holy Lands that are fighting. They're still fighting. Thus, he rejected help from anyone. In any way. The final battle of the Holy Lands. This battle belongs to the Holy Lands. Gu Han's body was beginning to sway, his vision already becoming blurry. One will eventually use up all their energy. He had taken on thousands of peak experts alone. It was already a miracle that he could last till now. It was enough to be written into an immortal legend. Gu Han knew that he had reached his limit, and may not even last till the next bout of attacks. There were less than 400 people ahead. However, those that could last till now were undoubtedly experts with considerable power. These outsider experts stared at him sinisterly, hoping that he would collapse on his own. Even if they knew the person in front of them was completely exhausted of his strength, not a single person dared to test him. The final moment arrived. I can still kill. Gu Han roared, charging ahead like before. Those remaining outsiders experts instantly detected that Gu Han was really spent for good. He was still human, and not an immortal. Over 1,500 outsiders Saint Emperor experts had already died at his hands. With a cry, the remaining outsiders experts came charging forward, flashing their weapons. Who didn't want to get the endless glory of slaying the #1 expert of the Holy Lands? Those two Saint Monarchs from the outsiders were right at the front. In a flash, both parties clashed. Time and space seemed to freeze at this moment. The two Saint Monarch pierced their weapons through Gu Han's body effortlessly. Countless weapons pierced through him at the same time. Gu Han did not dodge or avoid them, a calm look on his face. He only grabbed the two Saint Monarchs in a flash and yelled with all his strength. Jun Moxie. Don't forget what I entrusted you to do. This voice was extremely incisive, as if it had gushed right into the deepest parts of everyone's souls, reverberating on the battlefield for a long time. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. the #1 expert of Holy Lands and the Xian continent, Gu Han, suddenly self-detonated. This tremendous explosion was unprecedented. It was like an atomic bomb that went off. The immense waves instantly crumbled the peaks of the two mountains Jun Moxie had erected. Over 200 of the remaining 300 outsiders experts left were killed in this explosion. Even those that managed to survive were sent flying far away by the impact. As for the two Saint Monarchs who were caught by Gu Han and couldn't escape, they died along with him. The entire battlefield turned silent. Everyone's gaze looked over. Each of them wore a solemn expression, filled with endless admiration and respect. Jun Moxie felt his heart wrench and finally couldn't hold back his tears as they fell. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1245. The final battle begins. That final cry from Gu Han before he died still echoed in his ears. Jun Moxie. Don't forget about what I entrusted you to do. Jun Moxie could tell how much fatherly love this cry had encompassed, and Gu Han's imploration of him. At this moment, what Gu Han entrusted was his daughter Qiaoying. And it was only Qiaoying who was his final regret before his heroic sacrifice. His only regret. But he couldn't even call out "daughter" as he died. Because once he had said it, everyone would know that it was Qiaoying. So, he didn't say it. He wanted his daughter to continue living on blissfully without knowing the truth. He would rather that she didn't know that she had a father like him than feel hurt or regret. In the final moments of his life, Gu Han finally allowed all his fatherly love to burst out, the love he had suppressed in his heart for over thousands of years. But he wouldn't be able to do it anymore. I promise you. I will take good care of her. Rest assured. Jun Moxie said in his heart silently. But did you know that you've given me a great problem? You don't wish for your daughter to be sad. But how could I bear to let you have regrets? What should I do? Gu Han would never be able to answer his question. Forever. After the deafening explosion, the entire battlefield was unusually silent. Gu Han's heroic act had not only moved all the TNFA's warriors, it had also shocked all the surviving members from the outsiders. Everyone was silent and speechless as they looked at the mushroom cloud that rose. A tragic cry cut through this silence. Qiaoying came charging out in hysteria but was caught by Mei Xuan. She struggled with all her might, but her entire body began to freeze. And then she fainted, fresh blood spurting from her mouth. Although Qiaoying still didn't know that that respectable senior was her biological father and her only kin on this world, Gu Han's care and concern for her, and her admiration towards Gu Han may not necessarily be any lesser than father and daughter. Watching the closest person in the world suddenly leave this world, how could she not be heartbroken and devastated? Mei Xuan cradled Qiaoying in her arms, tears streaming from her eyes. She suddenly raised her hand, and TNFA's army began to beat their drums. Our comrades from the three Holy Lands have bravely sacrificed themselves. How can TNFA be willing to stay behind? Mei Xuan ordered. Bear King. Crane King. Wolf King. Tiger King. Order your troops to attack and hold them back at all costs. Everyone else, be on standby. Do not sully the name of TNFA. Bear King and the rest had witnessed this great battle, and their blood was already boiling. Practically everyone's heart was about to burst from holding back. The moment they received the order, they gave a ground-shattering roar and went charging ahead with their troops. Both forces began to draw close again. The valiant spirit that only belonged to soldiers was all incited at this moment. be it Tian Fa or the outsiders. At this moment, they felt their blood burning painfully. And this flame could not be relieved with simply a battle. Only the fresh blood of the enemy could satiate it. The moment they came into contact, it triggered a great battle. All the soldiers from both sides howled and charged forward in a frenzy. A battle to the death unfolded with this. The pillar of heaven's mountains was already destroyed, and the continent no longer had a natural barricade. They had to completely eliminate the outsiders in this battle. For once and for all. The outsiders were also thinking the same. That beautiful world was right before their eyes. With such a God-sent opportunity, if they still couldn't invade the continent this time, then there wouldn't be any hope of doing so in the future. To burn one's boats and fight with their backs to the river, it was either win or die. Both parties had the same circumstances and intentions. The outsiders came surging forward like waves. All of them wore sinister expressions, howling and screeching grotesquely with unexplainable vengeance. It rang out across the entire battlefield. The ground shook because of it. The skies trembled from it. Blood splattered everywhere the instant both forces came into contact. Everyone only had one thought, one action. They all howled and charged forward excitedly. Chopping, killing, stomping as they moved forward, leaving only a pool of blood behind them. With a whistle from Jun Moxie, the blood of yellow flame flew out from its sheath, flying across the sky in seconds and joining the battle on the other side. Jun Moxie was also an exceptionally sharp sword in the battle over here. His entire body was like a lethal weapon. The enemies fell in batches wherever he passed, although no one could see how he was attacking. Bear King and Tiger King brought their men and followed behind him, charging forward in a mad craze. Boom! The power of Earth was activated again, and a giant pit appeared out of nowhere beneath the feet of the outsiders. Over 100 outsiders fell into it screaming as they couldn't stop in time and were caught by surprise. Then, they were stampeded upon by their own people who were charging from behind, turning into a huge pool of blood. Boom! Another huge hole suddenly appeared again, this time in a different direction. Although he had recovered a small amount of spirit energy, he couldn't exert the power of Earth to its limit for the time being. Even if he could. Jun Moxie didn't intend to use it like that anymore. The outsiders were no fools. They were already on their guard. But Jun Moxie unintentionally realized that he could afford to use it on small scales, as it would only use very little spirit energy. And by using it in such small amounts, it had great effects. During a rapid battle like this where both sides were charging ahead so quickly, as long as the outsiders fell into the empty pit, they'd be stomped to death by their own people. Jun Moxie didn't have to do anything. There were truly too many of them. So small and shallow pits had also become an advantage. Those who were 5 people behind wouldn't know what happened in front. The only thing they knew was to charge. Charge! Charge! Such a frenzied attack had given Jun Moxie a great opportunity to deal significant damage without having to use too much energy. Holes began to appear on the ground randomly, and each appearance would take away the lives of dozens or even hundreds of outsiders. But there were truly too many outsiders, and even this sort of high-efficiency attacks wasn't enough to cripple them. Jun Moxie stretched out his arms as the purple chi began to shroud his body and burst out. Dozens of similar holes appeared before young Master Jun, and with their appearance, a series of tragic shrieks rang out. Seeing that the stratagem worked, Jun Moxie did not delay and immediately acted. With a wave of young Master Jun's hands, a sea of flames appeared and covered the surrounding radius of 10 miles. Then, With another wave of his hands, 9 fire dragons appeared and flew into the concentrated troops of the outsiders. Petrified screams rang out, shaking the heavens. The flame that had appeared this time wasn't the flame of primal chaos. Although this sort of ordinary flame wasn't fatal to Xian Qi experts, it still had effects on ordinary soldiers who were Sky Xians and below. Thick black smoke began to rise from the entire battlefield, coupled with the odd smell of burnt human flesh that pervaded the air. Big Bear and Earthcracker led their troops to slay to their heart's content. It had become so easy to kill the enemy following behind Jun Moxie. They only needed to aim their blades at those disgusting necks and go hacking down. On the other side, the blood of yellow flame shot through the outsiders' army like a meteorite, through their backs and the front again, with a shrill sword cry. It was merely a sword, but the damage it dealt was extremely terrifying. But there were truly too many outsiders taking part in the battle. In such a suicidal manner of attacking, many of them had surrounded the TNFA soldiers. And there were even more who bypassed the battles and went charging towards the main camp of TNFA, hoping to pull the carpet from under TNFA. If they could smash the headquarters, then they'd have the chance to invade the Xian continent. Then it'd be easy to do the rest afterwards. Countless of outsiders went charging forward like a swarm of locusts. The final battle was finally going to unfold here. After losing the geographical advantage, the outsiders still had the upper hand in this battle. They had swarmed all the soldiers from TNFA by outnumbering them, trapping them in individual battles to create middle-scale battles, while others bypassed these battles and charged straight into TNFA's camp. Mei Xuan wore a somber expression. TNFA's strength was undoubtedly superior. The ultimate victor of this battle would still be TNFA in a battle like this. But this victory would take time. When faced with the outsiders that were attacking by outnumbering the enemy, Mei Xuan was a little at a loss about what to do. She had already deployed over 30,000 TNFA soldiers out of the 40,000. Those behind her were races that were not good at battling. They were the logistic troops for this battle and had limited battle abilities. But from the looks of things, it was ultimately an inevitable battle. Mei Xuan's petite hand slowly rose up, holding a dazzling sword. It was the sword for the king that Jun Moxie had given her back then. The sword went hacking down, with chilling blade light. Mei Xuan yelled, "Everyone, move out for battle. With our lives. Carry out our duty. TNFA will never fall behind." It's not only the 3 holy lands that protected the continent for 10,000 years. TNFA also shares the same glory. For TNFA. For the glory of TNFA. Brothers, charge ah. With a flash of her white robes, Mei Xuan went charging into battle first, right into the mass of outsiders. All the soldiers from TNFA behind her roared, wielding their weapons as they went charging forward ferociously. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1246. Arrival of reinforcements. The entire battle became intertwined. Every minute and second had countless of people losing their lives. And these people came from the outsiders, and also TNFA and members of the evil Monarch Manor. The entire battlefield had already turned into a giant meat grinder. Everyone was killing away without the slightest care about life and death. If they couldn't slay the enemy with this blow, then they'd be slayed by the enemy. Even if they managed to take down the enemy, the next moment, they'd be taken down by another enemy. It was the same for the outsiders and TNFA soldiers. The outsiders had an advantage in numbers, But Tian Fa had exceptional battle abilities. The sacrifice of the three Holy Lands had wiped out almost 90% of the stronger forces amongst the outsiders. If they ultimately emerged victorious from this battle, the three Holy Lands' contributions would be extremely significant. Jun Moxie dwelled on his thoughts as he massacred away. It was a pity the stubbornness and pride of the three Holy Lands left Jun Moxie a little surprised. This battle had started with the three Holy Lands asking Tian Fa and evil Monarch Manor to join the battle. Jun Moxie had thought that they would be able to work together wholeheartedly. But he discovered that it was simply his one-sided delusion from start to end when things came to a head. Until the end, the people from Holy Lands would rather die than truly work with Tian Fa. Just as Mo Wudao said, some things were done wrongly. But if given another chance, even if they knew it was wrong, they'd still do it the same way. The heroic sacrifice of everyone from the three Holy Lands was undoubtedly a fatal blow to the outsiders. But amongst them, there were many people who shouldn't have died. But they chose to give up. Gu Han, for example. If he wished to, he would be able to continue living on, and even continue his journey. Perhaps, at the moment the pillar of heaven's mountains collapsed, these members of the Holy Lands had lost all their will to live. This battle may have given them the salvation they needed. It's a pity. Ah! The battle continued to drag on. There was killing going on everywhere. Looking down from above, there was no end in sight. This battle had truly covered too large an area. In an environment like this, even with Jun Moxie's miraculous abilities, he couldn't do anything about it. There's a limit to one's abilities. Jun Moxie was no exception to this. He could only allow the battle to go on. The only thing he could do right now was to kill more enemies. With every person he killed, it meant a greater chance of survival for his own people. The outsiders had obtained a significant upper hand by triggering the human sea stratagem. This was the first advantage the outsiders had won in terms of their strategies since the battle began. The higher-ups of the outsiders clearly recognized this. As long as they continued with this strategy, as long as a portion of the outsiders managed to invade the Xian continent, then they'd have obtained victory. Even if they couldn't slay all the Tian Fa warriors. With a strategy set in place, the outsiders began to reinforce on it, using their strongest troops to hold that last 10,000-men army, led by Mei Xuan, back as they deployed a small group of outsiders to invade the continent. If there were really outsiders that managed to successfully infiltrate the Xian continent, then it'd really be a long-lasting disaster. How could Mei Xuan not see this? But these troops that she was leading personally were the weakest bunch. They would only protect themselves against these bunch of outsiders. They really did not have much ability to hold them back. As to the other troops, they were all far away and surrounded by large number of enemies. There was nothing they could do. The only ones who could attempt to stop them would be Jun Moxie and Blood of Yellow Flame. But even if the two of them managed to rush over in them, could they truly stop the enemies? The perilous situation of the Xian continent completely erupted. At this moment, there was suddenly a troop of people hurrying over. Every single one of them wore an expression of utmost urgency, fearing that if they were late, they'd only receive news of defeat. Moxie, be careful of your own safety. I'll help you slay the enemies. A clear cry rang out. Jun Moxie was shocked, then elated. He leapt up and glanced over, only to hear a deafening roar rang out. A huge troop came charging out. The one leading them was none other than old Madame Dongfang. The three troops led by Jun Moxie's three uncles also went charging right onto the battlefield without even saying anything. The first group of reinforcements has arrived. The Dongfang family has arrived. There were battle flags fluttering from a distance. Another person shouted. Manor Lord Jun. Sikong Anya, have arrived. The experts of the Sikong family also arrived at this pivotal moment. Reinforcements from the Xian continent have arrived. Everyone be careful. Take care. These outsiders' scum cannot be taken lightly. Jun Moxie hollered loudly. Tianfa and evil Monarch Manor could completely suppress the enemies with their strength. But the families of the Xian continent may not be able to handle it. Any careless move would result in disastrous casualties. Jun Moxie's kin and friends made up the reinforcements. How could he not warn them? Another stammering voice also rang out. Jae-jun. That Jae-jun. I. Didwanmu. Si Chao. Fan have also arrived. It was Duanmu Chao Fan of the Duanmu family that had arrived. No one from the Continent Alliance found this stammering voice amusing. Instead, they felt a surge of hot blood pumping in their hearts. People from the continent have finally come. Another loud cry rang out. A person donned in pristine white robes came flying, holding his sword. The people of the continent are battling to stop the invaders. How could Blizzard's Silver City be left behind? It was City Lord of Blizzard's Silver City, Han Fengxue. He had led numerous experts from Blizzard's Silver City and rushed here. They all wore similar clothing. Their white robes and silver swords made it seem as if all the snow from the snowy mountains had suddenly fluttered here. A chilling cold wind also came blowing, cooling the unusually hot air of this battlefield. Loud rumbling could be heard from afar, as dust rose into the air. An agitated voice cried out. Moxie. You absolutely must hang in there. Third uncle is coming. Jun Moxie and Mei Xueyan perked up upon hearing this. Compared to the few voices from before, hearing the voice of this kin made them extremely excited. Because the arrival of this voice also meant that Tianfa's own reinforcements have arrived. Jun Wui had led the remaining forces left in Tianfa here at this crucial moment. This was a force of no less than 10,000 people. Although this batch of reinforcements could not compare to the Tianfa warriors that were engaged in a ferocious battle currently, they were 9th-level Xian beasts at the very least. A force like this was like nightmarish existence to the low-leveled outsiders on the battlefield. The only flaw was that these people had been rushing non-stop to get here, and did not have any time to rest or recuperate before plunging straight into battle. Engaging in a vicious slaughter. Naturally, they wouldn't be in peak form. But this unexpected reinforcement had resolved the greatest predicament. It was precisely the arrival of this batch of reinforcements that prevented any outsiders from invading the Xian continent, greatly alleviating the pressure on Tianfa. The battle situation began to slowly turn around. As the giant flags fluttered, Third Master Jun Wui led the last batch of reinforcements from Tianfa onto the battlefield. The outsiders may have had a considerable advantage against the experts of worldly families, but they couldn't gain any advantage against Tianfa troops that were organized in their attacks. Everyone in the vanguard, move out. Assist the battlefield at the fastest speed. Those in the middle and rear, halt. Seize every second to recuperate. 1 hour later, all of you in the middle, move out. Everyone in the flank and rear shall move out after 2 hours. The Blood General Jun Wui was truly one of the greatest generals. He clearly recognized that if they deployed all their forces mindlessly onto the battlefield, even if they'd be able to alleviate the battle situation, it didn't do anything to help the overall situation. And it would only increase the casualties on their own side. In fact, the forces led by Jun Moxie and Mei Xuan had never fallen into a disadvantageous position, although they were being surrounded. If given enough time, they'd definitely be able to turn the tables and crush the enemies. But that was on the condition that they had time. So there must be enough reinforcements partaking in the battle to obtain more time. Otherwise, there would be countless of outsiders that would be able to slip past them and invade into the continent, creating irreversible damage. But strategies were required to obtain time. Third Master Jun had clearly distinguished that his group of reinforcements was not for slaying the enemy, but to stop the enemy and help stall for time no matter what, until Jun Moxie and Tian Fa's troops were able to break free from their predicament. So he instantly gave the order for the vanguard to move out with the intention of making a sacrifice to stabilize and stall the entire battle. Then, the flanks and rear troops would take this time to recuperate and get organized. After an hour, they'd have recovered almost 40% of their strength, which allowed them to stall for even more time. And with this buffer, Jun Wui was confident that he could come up with strategies based on the changes in the battle and arrange the troops. He would attack the weaknesses of the enemy, using the smallest amount of troops to deal the greatest blow on the enemy. As to the third echelon that had rested for 2 hours, they would have recovered significantly. When that time came, they could all be deployed to secure victory. Jun Wui had just arrived on the battlefield and barely had the time to observe the situation. But he decisively decided on the strategy that would secure victory. This sort of foresight was unrivaled in this world, and it was the best tactic they could use as of now. But even then, the Blood General couldn't help but suck in a cold breath of air when he looked at this treacherous battlefield. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1247. Behead. Third Master Jun had spent half his life fighting wars and had also led tens of thousands of men to sweep across the world. But a treacherous battle like the one today was a first for him. These weren't ordinary soldiers that were fighting. Those who were fighting in these battles, even the cannon fodder, were considered expert existences within ordinary armies. The effects created by several tens of thousands of such experts fighting together was even more shocking than the armies in the millions from ordinary worldly countries clashing together. Jun Wui immediately concluded from a single glance. A battle like this shouldn't exist in the mortal realm. This sort of battle wasn't only unprecedented, it would also be unsurpassable. In the battlefield, under the lead of Solitary Eagle, the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer members were collecting the lives of the outsiders. In another direction, Leng Ao and Bailey Luoyun led their men to slay the enemy's face on instead of attempting to assassinate the higher-ups of the enemies. At some point in time, Supreme Assassin Chu Chihuan had also joined them. This small unit of assassins may not be great in numbers, but they were like a sharp, unstoppable awl. There were continuous cries coming from the side of the continent. There were countless Xian cultivators from that Xian continent that suddenly came charging out. Without taking any breaks, they joined the battle immediately. The long, exhausting journey and their inadequate strength had resulted in many reinforcements losing their lives the moment they charged onto the battlefield. But those who arrived later still continued to go charging forward without any hesitations. Not for the sake of leaving their name in history. Not for endless glory and honor. Only for the sake of doing their part for this continent. They may have passed on, but they came, they fought, and they lived. An hour passed quickly in the blink of an eye. It was like a long, excruciating wait. Jun Wui raised his hand and 30,000 middle troops marched orderly onto the battlefield with a frenzied roar. Under the strict command of Jun Wui, these Tian Fa soldiers had gotten into formation. The moment they entered the battlefield, They instantly dealt hefty damage and made an impactful contribution. The yelling on the battlefield intensified. It was unstoppable. Behind, far away, silhouettes could be seen arriving from the direction of the continent. In this 1 hour, thousands of people arrived and joined the battle. These reinforcements were the families that were subsidiary to the three Holy Lands. On this battlefield, the number of accidental killings was the least, simply because it was too easy to identify friend and foe. Because the outsiders looked completely different from humans, naturally, those that looked the same were comrades, and those that didn't were the enemies. As deaths and blood accumulated, another hour passed. Jun Moxie was about to deploy the rear troops who had recovered to their peak form, but he unexpectedly heard a loud sound coming from the direction of the continent. As if there was a huge troop coming. Jun Moxie stopped and did not give the command to advance. He saw flags flying in the air and several horses came rushing out, followed by a huge army. 2 white-bearded men were leading the troops, an incisive look in their eyes. One was debauchee, and the other, Murong Fengyun. The reinforcements from Tianxiang had also arrived. They were overjoyed to see an old friend at a time like this, but they didn't have the time to exchange pleasantries and immediately sought information on the situation. Debauchee and Murong Fengyun, along with their men and a few other small troops formed by other Xian cultivators that had joined them on the way, had a force of almost 10,000 men in total. To be able to gather such a huge army from the continent in such a rushed state was not an easy feat. Debauchee had been hurrying throughout the entire journey, completely exhausting 10,000 healthy horses to their deaths. The battle situation was in danger, so it didn't allow anyone to exchange greetings. They went straight to the point. My third echelon will go out first, Jun Moxie said. Uncles, please order all your men to rest and recuperate. In an hour's time, they have to get ready for action. We absolutely must kill all these outsiders over here. Otherwise, we can't get it done once and for all. All right. We shall do it that way. Debauchee and Murong Fengyun were old hands at disposition of the troops. They knew now was not the time for false courtesy. They immediately agreed. Jun Moxie's flag waved as the thunderous drums boomed. The final wave of 50,000 Tian Fa members went charging up uniformly. They had all rested for an hour and had recovered to their peak forms. In other words, they were considered fresh troops. Whereas the outsiders had always been in battle, and despite their large numbers, they did not have the chance to catch their breaths. The moment this wave of fresh troops joined the battle, the impact they brought was unprecedented. They consecutively took down dozens of outsiders' units, charging straight into the central position of the battle. A sudden loud cry rang out from the skies, and a giant avian creature came landing down. The head of the 8 great masters, Yun Biechan, and his partner have arrived and joined the battle. There was yelling from the direction of the continent. Guan Qinghan's father, Guan Donglu, had also arrived at this moment with all the soldiers from the Guan family. Then another. As more and more reinforcements arrived from the continent, the outsiders began to die one by one. Although there were many of them, they were not all indispensable. The balance of the victory of this battle and slowly, unconsciously tilted. Seeing that his worries had been resolved, young Master Jun went directly to take on those 3 saint monarchs left from the outsiders. He used great efforts to get these 3 scoundrels to gather together for him to deal with in one go. The process was rather simple. First, he kept chasing after one of them, making him beg for help. Then when they met with the other 2, he intentionally held back, making them think that they could rid him if they tried hard enough. Naturally, this sound lured the last outsider Saint Monarch out to join forces with them. As long as he left a bit of hope, they would definitely not give up on the chase. It was not like young Master Jun did not wish to settle them quickly. He may not have fallen into a disadvantage when dealing with these three Saint Monarchs alone, but Jun Moxie still did not have the abilities to kill a Saint Monarch expert with ease. Especially with their final move. Self-detonation. If Jun Moxie did not use the yin-yang escape art and took it head-on, he would still be heavily injured even if he didn't die. If these detonations went off in places where the Tianfa troops were concentrated, it would cause extremely dreadful casualties. This was also the main reason why Jun Moxie did not dare to force these three people too much. As long as he didn't have definite confidence of killing them with one shot, he would rather continue the battle. As young Master Jun battled with the last three Saint Monarchs from the outsiders, it was not as if he couldn't do anything else. Wherever young Master Jun passed, it was a sea of flames. Those flames that came out of nowhere burned ragingly the moment they came into contact with flesh. Jun Moxie really didn't know how many times he had secretly released the power of fire up till now. Alternating between the power of earth and power of fire, he estimated that almost 20,000 outsiders had died by his hands. This was undoubtedly a horrifying number. Up till now, the battle situation was clear. Young Master Jun, who no longer had any worries, began to launch his killing spree on these three Saint Monarchs. The three of them had met Jun Moxie once, and all of them had praised Jun Moxie's noble elegance. But now, they realized that this young man before them was no nobleman. He was 100 times more terrifying than a demon. Especially when Jun Moxie secretly whacked a black flame of primal chaos into the body of one of the Saint Monarchs earlier, causing him to turn into a ball of smoke. That was when the other two Saint Monarchs came to realization. The one boss led away wasn't the real head. The real head is this scoundrel who looks harmless and innocent. The moment this realization hit him, these two Saint Monarchs almost broke down from the anger. How could it be like this? This is too shameless. Too despicable. It was this Ashelo who had gotten rid of over 10,000 Saint Emperors with his black flame. Then, with all that kind and amiable grace, he urged Chuangshang Beidao to bring the other fellow away, while he himself stayed behind here, causing the entire Divine Sun clan to make the wrong judgment and resulting in their defeat right now. The two Saint Monarchs were filled with indignation. Their foreheads shrieked hatefully in unison. It's you. So it was you. So it was you who? Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. Isn't it just me? What are you all yelling about? Scum is scum. But you can't even speak properly. As he brought his hands up, the black flame began to appear on his palm. The two Saint Monarchs instantly tried to dodge the moment they saw that black flame. But Jun Moxie went hitting on the shoulder of one of the Saint Monarch, sending them upside down. Then Jun Moxie began to kick at them like he was kicking a rubber ball. After a series of attacks that rained upon them, the two Saint Monarchs finally couldn't bear it anymore. We can't defeat you, we admit it. But that doesn't mean that we can't take you along with us. With this thought, both of their eyes turned red. Just like Gu Han, they did not duck or avoid the attacks, charging straight at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie also yelled and charged forward, pretending to be ready to stake it all. On the surface, it looked as if the three of them were ready to take the other party down and perish together. Near. They were almost touching. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1248. Facing the enemy on their territory. The two Saint Monarchs laughed madly and roared. Jun Moxie, you donghua hypocrite. Die together with us. From the continuous shouts earlier, they'd already managed to find out that this youngster's name was Jun Moxie. At that time, the two of them had snorted with disdain, thinking to themselves that those mainlanders really were terrible at naming themselves. That name was so bad, unlike their divine sun race, whose names were so meaningful. Take Chuangshang Beidao, Dao Jiao Tuku, Maniai Kuzi, Sichuan Erden, those names were so pleasant to the ears. Only now did they finally realize what that name symbolized. This name had always represented ruin. However, even if you're more ferocious, the self-detonation of two Saint Monarchs will definitely be enough to send you on your way. Even if it was just one of us using self-detonation to attack, it was likely that even the boss, Chuangshang Beidao, would receive grave injuries. Your cultivation is only around the boss's level. How can you escape? Moreover, you'd already endured a full day of long battle. Jun Moxie laughed aloud. Good. This young master shall send you on your way then. Without retreating, he actually opened his arms and rushed forward. Both of them were filled with joy. Their muscles began to swell immediately. For Saint Monarchs, there was no need to channel anything to self-detonate. They could directly explode if they so wished. But for the sake of avoiding any accidents and to achieve the best effect, the two still chose to wait and channel their energies. They were determined to consign this annoying hypocrite to death. But in the next moment, just when their self-detonation sequence had already been initiated, the both of them found to their extreme anger that the hateful little fellow had actually disappeared completely. The most aggravating thing was that because they had been so violently chased and attacked all the way by Jun Moxie, they were now situated right in the middle of the densest part of their army ranks. Not only would their self-detonation this time not reach their enemy, they were even going to implicate their own people. The saddest thing was not even this. Both of them were already unable to reverse the process of their self-detonation. Everything was too late. A look of fear was imprinted in the stupefied eyes of the outsiders' warriors around those two Saint Monarchs as a piercing light burst out. In the next moment, a heaven-shocking explosion surged outwards. There was no need to say anything. The self-detonations on the level of Saint Monarchs were undoubtedly extremely huge. In the middle of such a large army, a 500-600 zhang wide area was completely blasted clear. The hole at the very center of that wide area was incomparably deep, looking like two huge black holes. Nearly 8,000 outsiders' soldiers had accompanied their respected Lord Saint Monarchs to the Yellow Springs, ensuring that the whole bunch of them would not be lonely. Most of them had died in complete confusion, not knowing how they had died. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that their own deaths would be caused by their own people. And it was their most respected leaders no less. This was simply too saddening. Right now, apart from Chuangshang Beidao, the other 6 Saint Monarchs had all fallen. 3 had been slain by Guhan, and the other 3 had all died because of Jun Moxie. Especially the last 2 who died by self-detonation, their death was filled with endless fury. Jun Moxie's spiritual sense quickly spread through the entire area, ensuring that there were no more peak enemy experts. This time, the assassination mission was relatively successful. With his mood greatly improved, Jun Moxie roared loudly and shot down from the sky. Everywhere he passed, a sea of fire would follow. Countless outsiders' soldiers were burned like candles as they ran around with their heads on fire. The fire burned through the soldiers as if it was burning through an ordinary bamboo forest, advancing over 300 zhang of area. After that, it rose up again, this time appearing like 9 fire dragons. 4 on the left, 4 on the right, and 1 in the middle. If one looked at it from the top, it would look like a gigantic fire phoenix. Burning resplendently, it swept across the battlefield. After Jun Moxie's actions, Big Bear's bear tribe and the reinforcements who arrived later only had to fight the scattered survivors and were not met with much resistance. Half the battlefield had actually been turned into a fiery refinement hell. With a whooshing sound, Jun Moxie landed before old Madame Dongfang. The old madam was wielding a gleaming sword and killing with great gusto, her entire body drenched mostly in the enemy's blood. Seeing Jun Moxie, she actually had the leisure to smile and look at him, asking, "How's your mother now?" Jun Moxie slapped out with both his palms, causing the tens of outsiders' soldiers before him to cry out miserably as they were sent flying backwards. As they flew, their bodies fell apart and were quickly engulfed by 2 fire dragons. Smiling widely in return, he nodded. Mother's temperament had improved greatly in this period of time. And from the looks of it, she's even gained a little weight. The old madam laughed gladly, but she still warned. Your mother is a person with very deep emotions. Although her emotions have improved, you still need to treat her well. Don't let her dwell too much on the matters of the past. As she said that, the old woman sighed heavily as she stood in the middle of the battlefield. Moxie understands. Jun Moxie's expression also turned heavy. After killing his fill for a moment and seeing that old Madame Dongfang's troops had already joined up with Crane King's warriors, he quickly clasped his hands. I'll take a look at the other side. After saying that, he shot off like a comet, stepping on the heads of the outsiders' soldiers, quickly opening up a large path of several zhang in the blink of an eye. Perhaps young Master Jun's movement technique had retrograde, but with every step he took, the heads of the outsiders' soldiers under his feet would directly burst apart. He looked as if he was stepping on watermelons all along the way. Of course, his speed was not hindered at all as he killed and hurried on. Seeing the young grandson of hers hurrying off like a hurricane, she smiled happily. This ability of Moxie is already unrivaled in this world now. Hearing her words, Dongfang Wenqing and the others also nodded deeply with thought. Under the strict and decisive directing of Jun Wui, the entire battle situation had begun to turn. The outsiders were being forced back continuously, and their soldiers were falling rapidly. The results of this war had already become clear. Jun Moxie was also finally able to relax. When he looked at the other groups fighting, their sides were all in the absolute advantage. After this battle, the next step would be to continue to press at the enemy's base. This was a matter that would need some proper preparation. As he thought of this, his gaze traveled in another direction. But in that moment, he froze slightly and suddenly rushed over. On the other side, the Guan family's family head, Guan Donglu, was currently leading the Guan family in a bitter fight. Although they were fighting with great will, their battle strength was still obviously weaker than the others. By now, the Guan family had already suffered many casualties. Because even the strongest among them, Guan Donglu, only had a cultivation at the Earth Xian level. Against the powerful strength of the outsiders' army, Guan Donglu was mired in great dangers at every turn, not to mention having enough strength to spare to help others. Guan Donglu, his 2 sons Guan Qingpa and Guan Qingyu, along with tens of Guan family experts, were hanging on desperately. Among them, there was a girl with her face covered in a black veil. Surrounded by hundreds of outsiders' warriors, they looked like the small group looked like they were about to be wiped out at any moment. Jun Moxie charged in with great momentum, carrying a loud whooshing sound. Before he reached, a large path was already cut through the forces that were surrounding the Guan family. Closely following that, a gush of fire swept through the area. The outsiders who had been in the advantage suddenly cried aloud as their battle strength dipped drastically. Jun Moxie opened a path with his bare hands and quickly arrived before Guan Donglu. But just as he wanted to say something, he found that the situation was somewhat awkward. Guan Qinghan was now his woman, and this old fellow before him could be said to be a legitimate father-in-law of his now. You're here. Guan Donglu also sounded somewhat stiff. Similarly, Lord Guan also didn't know how to address this person before him. Call him Moxie? That seems somewhat too casual. Son-in-law? It's still not that time yet. Then, third young master? What would that make me? The entire world knew that his daughter was sleeping in the same bed as this fellow, but they just hadn't gone through the formalities until now. Jun Moxie nodded silently. With 3 slaps, the entire group of outsiders soldiers were cleared out. Looking at Guan Donglu, he was just about to speak when his eyes fell upon the girl in the middle with the black veil. It's you. Jun Moxie's eyes instantly turned cold. This was actually Yuer, the top beauty of Spirit Fog Lake. It was also the same woman who'd once tried to assassinate Jun Moxie. This was the woman who was said to have the deepest hatred for Jun Moxie. After such a long time, they'd finally met again. Guan Qingyu, who was supported by 2 people, was covered in blood. She had clearly suffered quite a number of injuries. Guan Qingyu seemed to have always had a lot of feelings for this woman, even to the point of disregarding everything for her. Jun Moxie naturally knew about this. But never would he have thought that this woman would actually appear here under such unique circumstances. Back then, Jun Moxie had wanted to get rid of this woman after that assassination attempt. But who would have thought that in just a few short days, that woman would disappear completely from Tianxiang City. From then on, he never received any more news about her. That's right. It's me. Lady Yuer tore off her veil, revealing that beautiful face. Her eyes were extremely complicated as she looked at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie. Evil monarch. Are you very surprised that you would see me here? Guan Qingyu walked up nervously and supported Yuer's body. Yuer, don't be afraid. I'll be here with you. We will never part. A look of emotion flashed across Yuer's face, and she smiled bitterly in her heart as she thought to herself. If the evil monarch wishes to kill me, what difference would it make that you're here? However, she still felt quite touched by this idiot. So you'd been hiding in the Guan family all this time. Jun Moxie calmed down in an instant. Clasping his hands behind his back, he said in a low tone. No wonder even I wasn't able to find you. You should know. I've looked for you for an extremely long time. Perhaps this is what it means when people say that the area under the lamp is the darkest. The calmness of his voice caused Guan Qingyu and Yuer to both feel a shiver travel down their spines. Jun Moxie was looking for her. Why? It was naturally not because he missed her. It was to put her to death. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1249. Grudges and Gratitudes Resolved. Beauty of Fulfilling Others. The phrase that the area under the lamp is often the darkest was undoubtedly true. It was also something that could end up implicating the entire Guan family. Is that so? Then, I'll have to congratulate Lord Evil Monarch. Because you finally found me. There's no need to dwell on this problem anymore. Yuer's lithe body shook slightly, but she still continued stubbornly. Back then, Jun Xie killed my entire family, only leaving me in this world. Today, as the grandson of Jun Xie, if you kill me, it'll be considered as thoroughly removing the root of the grass, eliminating all future troubles. No! Guan Qingyu shouted and turned towards Jun Moxie with a pleading expression. Third young Master Jun, please let her off. Let Yuer off. I beg of you. She is the person that I love the most in this world. If there's no Yuer, I won't be able to live on. His body trembled heavily, and his lips shook. His eyes were already devoid of hope, because he could clearly see the intense killing intent brewing in Jun Moxie's eyes. Third young Master Jun, you and my elder sister are already a couple now. Could it be that you are willing to still tear away the happiness of your own little uncle? I beg you. Jun Moxie's body shivered slightly. One had to admit, those straw-grasping words that Guan Qingyu said had truly achieved the right effect. The reason why Jun Moxie could not endure Yuer was because this girl had always held nefarious intentions towards the Jun family. Especially now, even though they were all fighting for the continent, her hatred towards the Jun family had still not subsided even a bit. Yuer, who is your father? And who is your grandfather? Why do you have so much hatred for the Jun family? I believe that my grandfather is not a savage who kills the innocent. If you can give me a good explanation today, I might give you justice. Jun Moxie sighed lightly and said, could I possibly malign your grandfather? My grandfather is called Chu Tai Chen, the great general of Yan country. When Tianxiang fought to establish their lands, Jun Xie defeated my grandfather in battle, and he was ultimately killed under Jun Xie's blade. Yuer's eyes filled up with tears as she glared at Jun Moxie. Back then when our great Yan was destroyed, my father Chu Changfeng stayed to defend our ancestral home. In the end, he also died in the hands of Jun Wuhui. Grandfather and father's deaths left the Chu family without anyone to rely on, and our family was torn apart. In a single night, the Chu family was devoured by the Tang family, and everyone was either scattered or dead. I escaped and made my way through an arduous road to reach Tianxiang, only for revenge. Everything that happened to the Chu family was because of your Jun family. Your entire family is the murderer of my household. Jun Moxie snorted coldly and rolled his eyes. And here I thought that my grandfather had done something evil. So this supposed grudge is simply because your father and grandfather had been killed on the battlefield? Because of that, you've attributed all the misfortune that your family had met with to my Jun family? Miss, is that what you were trying to say? So by young Mrs. Logic, if my grandfather had not won on the battlefield that year, we would instead become the great benefactors of your family? If my grandfather lost, and my Jun family was the one being destroyed, would that be the correct outcome? Yuer was completely unable to reply. She was very young when her family fell apart, and she'd suffered all her childhood. She'd already concluded since then that all her misfortune was because of the Jun family. She only felt that if the Jun family hadn't existed, her family would still be whole and happy. But she'd never once thought to think about the other side of the coin. Now when she was questioned like this, she was suddenly stumped, and couldn't reply. Jun Moxie continued pressing. Haha. Young Mrs. ability to reason is really breathtaking. By young Mrs. Logic, wouldn't my Jun family's enemies be so plentiful that the entire world would be filled with them? Our family's 3 generations are all soldiers and generals. The number of people who've died under their blades can be numbered in the millions. If the families of every one of those soldiers wanted to seek revenge, How many heads does our little Jun family have to give to everyone who comes? What a joke. And, after today, you can include a Jun Moxie into your list of savage and abhorrible Jun family members. After all, this seat had killed a huge number of outsiders' people. I'm sure they would wish to seek revenge as well. Because I'm the biggest enemy that blocked their path into the Xian continent. Jun Moxie had also not thought before that Yuer's deep-seated hatred was actually such a matter. To Yuer, this was an incredibly difficult thing to bear. But to Jun Moxie, it was an extremely laughable matter. It was truly too laughable. The duty of a soldier had always been to fight for their country. Dying on the battlefield should be the greatest honor for any soldier. But if the family members of every soldier who died on the battlefield went to look for the enemy general for revenge, the world would really go chaotic. Among soldiers on the battlefield, there were never anything like grudges. They only had different positions. Nothing more. Guan Qingyu held tightly onto Yuer's wrist and explained anxiously. Jun Moxie. Brother-in-law. In this period of time, I'd always been advising her. And in truth, Yuer's hatred had already been mostly put down already. Brother-in-law, you must believe me. As long as Yuer is with me, she will never do anything to harm the Jun family. Guan Qingyu was so anxious that he even directly called out the words brother-in-law. Yuer appeared somewhat unwilling that her wrist was being grabbed, and her face was still filled with grief and rage. However, she no longer continued to struggle. Truthfully, how could she not understand the same logic? It was only because of the deep hatred that she'd always held in her heart, causing her to be unwilling to confront the thought. After being scolded so thoroughly by Jun Moxie now, everything had become clearer to her. You guarantee? Are you able to guarantee anything? What if I insist on plucking out the weeds completely and kill? Jun Moxie's face turned cold as he asked. But even when he said that, there was no more killing intent in his heart. On the surface, Yuer's hatred was so huge that they could not live under the same sky. But in truth, she was just a girl with some mental trauma. After the Chu family fell apart, it was this thought of revenge that allowed her to live on until now. If even this motivation collapsed, she might also crumble apart herself. The main reason that Jun Moxie was unwilling to kill was not because young Master Jun was his little uncle's beloved woman. The title of being his little uncle certainly did have a certain amount of face attached to it. But this also depended on whether young Master Jun was willing to give him that face, and how much of it. Right now, the most important reason was that Yuer was simply too weak. She was much too weak. Her cultivation was only barely at the rudimentary level of golden Xian. With such a cultivation, even if the weakest person from the Jun family stood out and let her hack at them wildly with a knife without retaliating, she would die of exhaustion before she could hurt anyone. Schemes could indeed be useful in dealing with experts, but there was still a limit to them. Against experts whose strengths far surpassed the masses, any kind of plot or schemes would just be a joke. Jun Moxie had always been a very realistic person. With the current power that the Jun family possessed, an existence like Yuer was something that couldn't even compare to an ant. There was completely no need to pay her any mind. If you must kill, I, Guan Qingyu, am willing to die in her place. Guan Qingyu's eyes turned red as he gritted his teeth and said, If I cannot die in her place, then please allow me to die together with her. Hand in hand, we will tread the yellow springs together. By the time he finished speaking, his lips had already been bitten until it bled. But without bothering to wipe them away, he looked at Jun Moxie and knelt down. Qingyu. Yue cried out and looked at him with her heart shattering apart. In that moment, she was actually unable to say anything. This was the man who'd been chasing after her from the start, never wavering in the slightest. Even though she'd never reciprocated anything. He did not change his conviction. He would stupidly do things that even she despised, as he tried his best to please her. At first, for the sake of taking revenge against the Jun family, she intentionally gotten close to him, to use him. Yet he'd never once suspected her. When she got the information she needed and left without a word, he did not blame her at all. Later on, when he saw her again, he still behaved as passionately as before towards her. Finally, when her plot was discovered by Jun Moxie, and she was forced to flee from Tianxiang City, she found that with the influence of the Jun family, there was actually no place for her to hide even in this vast world. Just at this time, Guan Qingyu once again appeared in front of her. He would rather fall out with his family to protect her. In this period of time, in order to protect her, he was beaten up badly by his father several times. However, he still refused to budge even a step. Today, because of her, against her greatest enemy, a peerless expert whom they had no hope of resisting, he put down his pride as a man to beg for mercy. He was even willing to give up on his life to exchange for her to be able to keep on living. If she must die, he was willing to die along with her. Such a pure and true love, how many men in the world would be able to go so far for a woman he loved? She'd already received so much. Why would there be anything that she wasn't unsatisfied with? Why had she never noticed his true love? Could it be that her heart was really blinded? In this moment, Yuer's heart that had been tightly sealed for all these years was deeply moved by this idiotic fellow. Sighing heavily, Guan Donglu shook his head. Jun. Third young master Jun. In truth, our Guan family has in truth let down the Jun family in this matter. Qing Yu was so deep in love. And this old man was also unable to do anything about it in a short moment, so we could only delay it first. This time, we've come to Tiannan to help with the war. And originally, it was just to contribute our strength for the continent. If we could meet you, it would naturally be best if we could explain the matter to you in person. But if we didn't see you, everything would also be resolved with the wind once our family died fighting here. On the side, Guan Qingpa looked expression. Truthfully, this first young master of the Guan family had always looked quite disdainfully at that younger brother of his being so obsessed with a woman. A young man like his brother wouldn't need to be scared of not being able to find a wife anyways. Was there a need to be like this? Jun Moxie nodded his head blandly as he looked at Guan Qingyu. Guan Qingyu, are you really willing to die with her? Fine then. Since you'd already spoken, I'll give you that face. There's no need to travel the Yellow Springs together. If you're willing to die for her, I'll spare her life. In any case, as long as I can take one life today, that'll be sufficient. Your death or hers. It's the same. The moment those words came out, anyone could tell that Jun Moxie was determined to kill Yuer. In that moment, everyone's faces changed as they cursed Jun Moxie in their hearts for being so unfeeling. However, Guan Qingyu leaped up with an excited expression. Are those words for real? A man is only as good as his words. I, Jun Moxie, never speak false words. Jun Moxie nodded lightly. Looking at this silly fellow, he's truly irredeemably deep in love. Fine then, I'll fulfill him. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1250. So this is the barrier of emotion. Break. Guan Qingyu nodded and his serious expression disappeared. Laughing happily, he stepped forward with wide steps. Many thanks, brother-in-law, for fulfilling my wish. I hope that brother-in-law will not forget the words you said today. In the future, if Yuer manages to offend you again, I hope that you will give her a way out. At this time, he was still worried about Yuer's future. Don't. Yuer howled with pain as her tears gushed out of her eyes. Blocking before Guan Qingyu, she howled madly. Jun Moxie, the person who wanted to take revenge against you is me alone. From the start, it was just me. It has nothing to do with Guan Qingyu. Come, I will give my life to you immediately. He's innocent. He has nothing to do with the matter between the two of us. Also, he doesn't have anything to do with me. Yuer opened her arms and stood before Guan Qingyu like an eagle protecting its mate. Her eyes were panicked and filled with hopelessness. At that moment, she didn't know what she was doing, or what she could do. At that moment, she suddenly felt an intense pain in her chest. That instant when Guan Qingyu stepped out and stood before her, the entire world seemed to have lost its color. From then, she discovered that in this world, there was actually such a person whom she could not lose, even if she lost everything else. But why didn't I know this before? She finally understood Guan Qingyu's actions. Because right now, she was the same as him. As long as Guan Qingyu could live on, it wouldn't matter even if she died. So this was how deeply he'd loved me all this time. But I only understood now how precious this true love is. Unfortunately, I only discovered this when I'm about to die. Why didn't I understand my heart sooner? If I knew, even a little earlier, would I still be obsessed with revenge? What matters can be more important than growing old with a person whom I love? It was easier to obtain a priceless treasure than to find a devoted man who loves his wife unconditionally. This phrase had proliferated the world for 10,000 years, but she'd never thought much of them before. Moreover, that supposed hatred that she'd held so tightly onto was just a result of a clash between two armies, a war between two countries. It really wasn't worth it. Why was it that humans only thought about turning back when they had reached the point of no return? These thoughts suddenly appeared in Yuer's mind, causing her to feel endless regret. Turning around to look at Guan Qingyu, tears of regret began to flow down unstoppably from her eyes. However, she kept her eyes wide open stubbornly, to look at that idiot's face. That face had once been obscured by the hatred in her heart, causing her to never once look properly at it. But at this moment, it seemed as though she would never get enough of looking at it. Even though I'm going to die for you, I really feel so reluctant to go. I really want to live on and look at your face as you treat me gently. I promise, I won't be as cold to you as before. The two stood there looking at each other, and at that moment, both of them seemed to be frozen in time. Ahem. Guan Donglu, who was standing at the side, furrowed his brows and cleared his throat loudly. What are you still looking at? He's already gone. On the side, Guan Qingpa chuckled lightly and shook his head. The two of you, is this the proper time to be so lovey-dovey? Wait until you get home and close the door. Then you can gaze at each other all day long. Right now, don't just stand there and do this in front of us. Yuer and Guan Qingyu raised their heads, only to see Guan Donglu and Guan Qingpa looking at them with smiles on their faces. Young Master Jun had already disappeared long ago. Several hundred zhang away, a white shadow was flying around rapidly, killing outsiders' soldiers. Where's Jun Moxie? Why did he leave? Did he let us go? Guan Qingyu yelped aloud with joy. Obviously. Could it be that until now, you still think that he really wants to kill both of you? Guan Donglu rolled his eyes at his dim-witted son, somewhat speechless. Although Jun Moxie's words had sounded serious, anyone with some brains would be able to see the situation easily. Would he really kill Guan Qinghan's little brother? That would be truly ridiculous. Really? Huh. This is good. You don't need to die. I also don't need to die, nobody is going to die. If I had died, I wouldn't be able to see you anymore. Ha ha ha. Guan Qingyu laughed dumbly, his face full of exhilaration. Looking at Yuer, he wanted to rush up and grab her and twirl her in the air to celebrate. But in the end, he didn't dare to do it, and just stood there with a silly smile on his face. Dumbo. Tears hovered in Yuer's eyes as she looked at him. Stretching out her little hand, she placed it in his hands, this idiot. At this time, he was still rejoicing that she didn't need to die, and his only worry was that he wouldn't be able to see her if he had died. Suddenly feeling that there was a small and warm hand in his palm, Guan Qingyu suddenly grew somewhat flustered. Freezing slightly, his hands shook, and he almost dropped Yuer's hand. Stretching his hand out again, he hurriedly caught her hand in both his palms. This time, his face was plastered with a silly smile, and no matter what, he refused to let go anymore. His entire face was completely red, as though they were about to leak blood. This was not only from shyness. It was from all the agitated blood rushing to his head. Truly an idiot. Ha ha ha. Guan Qingpa also laughed aloud. Seeing Yuer placing her hands in Guan Qingyue's palm, he also felt a warm feeling in his heart. Qingyu. To be honest, I'm not too used to seeing this, but as your elder brother, I have nothing but blessings for you. Guan Qingpa could not help but to say his heartfelt feelings. Second brother, now that you've obtained your beauty, you won't be fighting with me for power in the family anymore, right? These two brothers. One of them was a hopeless romantic, while the other had great ambition for authority. But now, they were able to confront this issue face to face. This was something that their father Guan Donglu had not imagined would happen. Because this meant that these two brothers would never possibly end up fighting each other in the future. What's the purpose of that broken title? I've never been interested in the position of family head before and will never be interested to contend against you for it as well. Even if you wanted to let me take up the position, I'd be too lazy to do it. How can a mere position of family head be compared to my Yuer? Guan Qingyu held tightly onto Yuer's hand. But as if he was afraid that he would hurt her, he relaxed his grip and held her tenderly. Without even thinking, he snorted and replied. You stinky brat. What kind of words are those? Guan Donglu roared with rage. But for some reason, his face was also covered with a smile. Wasn't such an ending the best possible scenario? Yuer lowered her head shyly, her heart filled with a peaceful joy. So it turns out that this is the kind of happiness that I'd been yearning for. Thinking here, she raised her head and looked into the distance where Jun Moxie was. Jun. Third young Master Jun. Don't worry, I will never seek revenge against you anymore in the future. Far away, the sound of Jun Moxie's laughter rang out. Lass, you're really silly. Is the evil monarch someone that you can make as a target for vengeance? Even if he didn't retaliate and let you hack at him as you wish, do you think you can hurt him? You'd die by exhaustion and still not do anything to him. Guan Donglu laughed, causing everyone to also laugh aloud. Yuer stood there with her face completely red. And she also could not help but to smile. At this time, Jun Moxie, who was in the middle of the intense battlefield, suddenly had a flash of comprehension. So, this was the barrier of emotion. This was the barrier of emotion. Since ancient times, emotions were known to be difficult to overcome. Love could cause people to be eternally doomed, and it could also let one rise to the heavens. If it was the latter, it could cause a person to turn into a terrible demon. But the latter could allow one to become a sage. Love. So this was the barrier of emotion. It's sunny in the east, but raining in the west. What seems to be heartless contains some heart as well. Jun Moxie's heart suddenly became clear. At that moment, he seemed to have received a stroke of enlightenment. Countless stubborn barriers in his heart and mind suddenly began to crumble and disappear. Whether it was his spirit or body, the suddenly felt a complete harmony. At that moment, he'd actually stepped into the 7th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Jun Moxie roared aloud and suddenly soared into the sky. With a wave of his 2 hands, a huge fire dragon rose up on his left. On his right, a wave of fog burst out, sweeping through the enemy forces and turning all the outsiders' soldiers into ice statues. At such a crucial moment, he broke through once again. It was not just a breakthrough with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, he'd also broken through the barrier of emotion. This barrier of emotion that had bogged down countless heroes through the ages of time had broken. It was a well-timed breakthrough. With this breakthrough, Jun Moxie's mental state had reached a completely new level. Jun Moxie's body was not the only thing that was rejoicing about this breakthrough. The Hongjun Pagoda seemed to be wild about the breakthrough of its owner as well. It seemed as if it had waited an extremely long time for this day. At the instant that he broke through, all the primal chaos purple chi inside the Hongjun Pagoda was roused up excitedly. Following that, a purple cyclone formed around him, funneling madly into his meridians. The amount that was entering his body this time was unprecedentedly huge. Surprisingly, the strength of Jun Moxie's meridians also seemed to have increased by hundreds to thousands of times. Even though there was an ocean of primal chaos purple chi, his body swallowed everything as though it was a gigantic whale drinking water. Inside his dantian, the little world that was formed with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune suddenly began to expand. In the blink of an eye, it had already grown hundreds of millions of times wider in size. It was completely boundless, and all the dreary gray foggy energy completely disappeared without a trace. The sky was vast and wide, while the lands stretched out as far as the eye could see. At that moment, this small world had finally truly turned into a real world. Although there were still no constellations, mountains, and rivers, this was undoubtedly a proper world. Compared to before, where it was like looking at flowers through a fog, the difference between that and now was like the difference between night and day. In anyone's eyes, it was clear that there was a clear blue sky above their heads, and dark, solid earth beneath their feet. If before could be said to be the initial stages of a world, and the world was filled with endless primordial elements, now, the world could be said to be newly formed. Jun Moxie's cultivation had also reached the peak of the 7th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune because of this transformation as well. His strength had also increased greatly. Jun Moxie felt the shocking improvements in his body and was incredibly excited. Laughing aloud, he rose higher into the sky and shouted, "Everybody, let's work together and kill all these outsiders freaks. Eliminate every last one of them and destroy any future troubles." On the battlefield, the continent's allied army already held the absolute advantage. Hearing this call, Jun Wui smiled and gave out the command for the final push. Duge Zongheng and Murong Fengyun, those two old generals who had been ready at the side, also led the Tianxiang army as they charged into the battlefield. Like a gigantic wave, they crashed into the outsiders' army. The enemy army began to fall and crumble, like a mountain dropping. This story will be continued to chapter 1251. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.